Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished checking the power grid in Section 7 of Meridian Point. The massive space station hummed quietly around him, its corridors filled with the sounds of different species going about their daily lives. Human voices mixed with the musical tones of the Volari and the deep rumbles of the rock-like granite people. He loved this place. 3 years ago, when he first arrived as a civilian contractor after leaving Earth's military, Jake never imagined he would find a home among the stars. More importantly, he never imagined he would find love. The soft chime of his communication device made him smile. Only one person used that particular tone. "Jake, are you finished with the repairs?" Lyra's voice came through the speaker, warm and gentle like always. Even through the comm system, her words carried the special feeling that all Volari possessed. They called it empathy, but Jake knew it was something much deeper than that. "Just wrapping up now," he said, closing his toolkit. "How did the morning session go?" "Very well. The trade dispute between the Krell merchants and the Granite Mining Guild is finally resolved. Both sides are happy with the agreement." He could hear the joy in her voice. Lyra took great pride in her work as a mediator. Her natural gifts made her perfect for helping different species understand each other. Jake made his way through the station's main corridor toward the diplomatic center. Along the way, he passed the usual mix of beings that made Meridian Point special. A group of young human children played with Volari youngsters, their crystal-like skin catching the light as they laughed together. 2 granite engineers discussed repairs with a human supervisor, their massive stone hands gesturing carefully around the delicate human equipment. This was what the galaxy could be, Jake thought. Different species working together, learning from each other, building something better than any of them could create alone. He found Lyra in her office, reviewing reports on her data pad. When she looked up and saw him, her entire face lit up with happiness. The crystal formations that grew from her temples sparkled more brightly, a sure sign of joy among her people. "There you are," she said, standing to embrace him. Even after 3 years of marriage, Jake still marveled at how perfectly she fit in his arms. The Volari were tall and thin, with skin that looked like living crystal. Most humans found them beautiful, but Jake knew that Lyra was special even among her own people. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, placing his hand gently on her stomach. At 4 months pregnant, she was just starting to show. Their child would be the first human Volari hybrid born on Meridian Point, and the medical team was fascinated by the development. Strong, happy, a little tired. But Dr. Martinez says that's normal. She placed her hand over his. "The baby moved this morning during my meeting. I think he or she was trying to help me negotiate." Jake laughed. "Already taking after Mom, then?" They walked together toward the central plaza, where many of the station's residents gathered during their off-duty hours. The plaza was designed like a park, with plants and trees from dozens of different worlds growing under a massive transparent dome that showed the stars beyond. "Jake, Lyra, over here." They turned to see Alex Turner waving at them from a table near the fountain. Jake's oldest friend had arrived on Meridian Point just 2 months ago, taking a position as a shuttle pilot. It was good to have him around again. "How goes the exciting world of transport duty?" Jake asked as they sat down. Alex grinned. "Better than you might think. Today I flew a delegation of Volari artists to the outer station. They're planning some kind of art exhibition that's supposed to represent harmony between the stars. Very impressive stuff." "The Volari have always been artists," Lyra said with pride.
"My people believe that beauty and peace go together."
"When you create something beautiful, you help create peace." "Speaking of peace," Alex said, his voice becoming more serious. "Have you heard the latest news from the Outer Rim?" Jake noticed Lyra's crystal formations dim slightly. Bad news always affected her more than others because of her empathic abilities. "What kind of news?" Jake asked. "More raids by the hegemony. They hit 3 more trade outposts this week. The official reports say they were looking for smugglers, but the survivors tell a different story. The hegemony was a military alliance led by the Sarkani Empire. They controlled a large section of space on the far side of the galaxy, and had been expanding their territory for the past decade. Most species tried to avoid conflict with them, but their attacks were becoming more frequent and more brutal." "What did the survivors say?" Lyra asked quietly. Alex looked uncomfortable. "They said the Sarkani weren't looking for smugglers. They were targeting mixed families. Humans married to other species and their children." Jake felt a cold anger start to build in his chest. That's not possible. Even the Sarkani wouldn't target civilians based on who they married. The Galactic Council is calling it propaganda, Alex said. But 3 different outposts, Jake, 3 different sets of survivors telling the same story. Lyra's hand found Jake's under the table. Her empathic abilities meant she could feel his anger, and her touch helped calm him down. The hegemony has always been hostile to the idea of species cooperation, she said softly. But surely they wouldn't harm families. Surely they wouldn't harm children. Jake squeezed her hand gently. It's just rumors, love. The Outer Rim is always full of wild stories. But even as he said it, Jake felt worried. The Sarkani had never hidden their belief that different species should remain separate. They called it genetic purity, and claimed that mixing between species would weaken everyone involved. As they walked home later that evening, Jake and Lyra talked about happier things. They discussed names for their baby, plans for the nursery, and Lyra's hope that their child would grow up in a galaxy where such conversations about raids and attacks would be unnecessary. Do you think our child will look more human or more Valari? Lyra asked as they entered their quarters. I think our child will look perfect, Jake said, pulling her close, just like their mother. That night, as Lyra slept beside him, Jake stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was planning their next move. But here on Meridian Point, surrounded by the proof that different species could live and love together, those threats seemed very far away. Jake had no way of knowing that in just 2 days, those faraway threats would destroy everything he loved. He had no way of knowing that the man sleeping peacefully beside his alien wife would soon become something the galaxy had never seen before. All he knew was that he was happy, and that tomorrow would bring another day in paradise among the stars. Jake was 40,000 kilometers away when his world ended. The repair work on the communication relay had taken longer than expected. What should have been a 6-hour job had stretched into 2 days when they discovered the damage was worse than the initial reports suggested. Jake worked alongside 2 other engineers in the cold vacuum of space, replacing damaged components and rewiring control systems. He was looking forward to getting home to Lyra. She had been tired lately, and the pregnancy was making her more sensitive to the emotions of others around her. The busy diplomatic center could be overwhelming for someone with her abilities. Jake, we're getting some strange readings from long-range sensors, called out Pete Santos, the senior technician on the repair crew. Multiple ships approaching Meridian Point, big ones. Jake pulled himself over to the sensor station. The display showed at least 20 ships moving toward the station at high speed. The configuration was military, but not any design he recognized from the regular patrol schedules. Are they broadcasting identification codes? Jake asked. Negative, and they're not responding to our communication attempts. A cold fear started to grow in Jake's stomach. What's their estimated time to the station? At current speed, about 30 minutes. Jake activated his personal communicator. Meridian Point Control, this is Jake Morrison on repair duty. We're reading incoming ships that aren't responding to communication attempts. The voice that came back was tense. We see them, Jake. Station security is trying to make contact now. All civilian shuttles are being recalled immediately. I need to get back to the station, Jake said. Negative, Jake. Those ships are moving too fast. You wouldn't make it in time, and we don't want any civilian craft in the area until we know what's happening. Jake watched helplessly as the unknown ships grew larger on the sensor display. 24 vessels, all of them heavily armed. As they got closer, the sensors were able to identify their design. Sarkani Empire warships. This is impossible, Pete said, staring at the display. The Sarkani have never operated this far into neutral space. What are they doing here? Jake's hand shook as he tried to raise Lyra on his personal communicator. The signal went through, but there was no answer. She was probably in a meeting, he told himself. She always turned off her communicator during diplomatic sessions. The first explosions began 28 minutes later. From their position near the relay station, Jake and his crew watched in horror as energy weapons lit up the space around Meridian Point. The station's defensive systems activated, but they were designed to handle pirates and small raiders, not a full military assault. Meridian Point Control, this is Repair Team 7. What's your status? Jake called desperately into his communicator. The response came through broken by static and the sound of alarms. Under attack. Sarkani forces have breached sections 4 and 7. requesting immediate assistance from any available ships. Jake was already moving toward their shuttle when Pete grabbed his arm. "Jake, you can't. That shuttle isn't armed, and those are military warships out there." "My wife is on that station," Jake said. "Pulling free, and getting yourself killed won't help her." But Jake was no longer listening to reason. He reached the shuttle and began the startup sequence, his fingers flying over the controls with the speed that came from years of military training. Behind him, Pete and the other engineer were arguing about whether to try to stop him. The shuttle launched just as another wave of explosions rocked Meridian Point. Jake pushed the engines to maximum power, racing toward the station as fast as the small craft could manage. As he got closer, he could see Sarkani fighters moving through the station's corridors, and he could hear more communications traffic on the emergency channels. "All civilians evacuate to emergency shelters. Sarkani forces are targeting the diplomatic center. Medical bay under attack. The diplomatic center. That's where Lyra would be." Jake tried again to reach her on the communicator. This time the signal connected. "Jake?" Her voice was frightened and he could hear weapon fire in the background. "Lyra, where are you?" "Medical bay. I came here when the alarm started." "The baby. I was worried about the baby." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." "Jake, no. It's too dangerous. The Sarkani soldiers are everywhere. They're not just attacking the station. They're hunting for specific people." "What do you mean?" "The mixed families, Jake. The survivors from the Outer Rim were telling the truth. They're targeting anyone who married outside their species. They're targeting the children." Jake's blood turned to ice. "Lyra, you need to hide. Find somewhere safe and wait for me. I love you, Jake. Whatever happens, remember that I love you. Nothing is going to happen. I'll be there in 10 minutes." But even as he said it, Jake could see that he was too late. Sarkani fighters had surrounded the station, and any ship trying to approach was being fired upon immediately. His shuttle's communication system crackled with a new transmission, this one coming from the lead Sarkani vessel. "Attention all beings on this station. You are harboring genetic criminals and their abominations. Surrender them immediately, or face the consequences of protecting traitors to natural order." The voice was cold and mechanical, translated through a universal communicator, but Jake could hear the hatred behind the words. "This is General Vex Tharn of the Sarkani Empire. We know that this station contains multiple examples of species contamination. Mixed marriages and hybrid offspring represent a threat to the genetic purity that keeps the galaxy stable. These criminals and their spawn will be eliminated." Jake pushed his shuttle harder, trying to find a way through the Sarkani blockade. The station's defense grid was failing, and he could see Sarkani soldiers moving through the corridors on the security feeds. His communicator activated again. This time it wasn't Lyra's voice, but the station's emergency broadcast system. "All personnel, this is Commander Walsh. We are attempting to negotiate with the Sarkani forces. All civilians should remain in emergency shelters until further notice." But Jake knew there would be no negotiation. The Sarkani had come here with a specific purpose, and they wouldn't leave until they had completed it. He managed to get within 5 kilometers of the station before a Sarkani fighter locked onto his shuttle. Warning lights flashed across his control panel as the enemy ship prepared to fire. "Human vessel, you will withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Jake had no choice. His shuttle had no weapons and no shields. If he continued, he would be killed before he could reach Lyra. As he turned away, his communicator crackled one last time. The signal was weak and full of static, but he could hear Lyra's voice clearly. "Jake, they found me. I can feel their hatred. It's so strong, so cold. But I can also feel our baby, and our baby is not afraid. Our child knows love, Jake. Whatever they do to us, our child dies knowing love. Lyra, remember our love, not my death. But if you must remember my death, let it mean something." The transmission ended. Jake screamed her name into the communicator, but there was no response. On the security feeds, he watched Sarkani soldiers moving through the medical bay. He watched them find the Valari who had been hiding there. He watched them carry out their orders with military efficiency and complete ruthlessness. When it was over, General Tharn's voice filled the communication channels one more time. "Let this be a lesson to all species who would contaminate themselves with alien genetics. The Sarkani Empire will not tolerate the pollution of pure bloodlines. Any world, any station, any colony that harbors such abominations will face the same fate." Jake floated in space, watching the Sarkani fleet withdraw as quickly as they had arrived. Behind them, they left Meridian Point burning and broken. The station's emergency systems were working to contain the damage, but Jake knew that some things could never be repaired. His wife was dead. His unborn child was dead, and somewhere in the depths of his soul, something new was being born, something cold and patient and absolutely merciless. The Sarkani thought they had sent a message. They had no idea what message they had actually delivered. They had just taught a human what it meant to have nothing left to lose. Jake Morrison died with his wife. What came back to Meridian Point 3 days later was something else entirely. The memorial service was held in what remained of the central plaza. The transparent dome had been cracked by weapons fire, and temporary force fields kept the air inside while repair crews worked around the clock. 17 different species had lost family members in the attack, but the Sarkani had focused their hatred on the mixed couples and their children. Jake stood at the edge of the gathering, listening to the speakers talk about love transcending boundaries and hope surviving in the darkest times. Their words felt empty to him now. Hope was a luxury for people who still had something to lose. Jake? Alex Turner approached carefully. His friend looked like he hadn't slept since the attack. The council wants to talk to you about what you saw during the attack. What I saw was my wife being murdered while I watched from space. I know. But they think your testimony might help with the formal complaint they're filing with the Galactic Authority. Jake turned to look at Alex directly. His friend stepped back, startled by what he saw in Jake's eyes. A formal complaint? The council is demanding justice through proper diplomatic channels. They want the Sarkani held accountable for attacking a neutral station. Diplomatic channels. Jake's voice was flat, emotionless. How long do diplomatic channels usually take, Alex? I don't know. Months, maybe years. But Jake, we have to trust the system. We have to believe that justice will come. Justice. Jake tested the word like it was foreign to him. Tell me, Alex, what kind of justice brings Lyra back? What kind of justice gives my child a chance to be born? Alex didn't have an answer for that. Jake left Meridian Point that same day. He took his shuttle and disappeared into the Outer Rim, where broken men went to forget their past and smugglers went to avoid their future. But Jake wasn't trying to forget, and he wasn't running from anything. He was preparing. The first thing he did was change his ship's identification codes. Jake Morrison was officially dead, killed in the attack on Meridian Point. The man who flew through the Outer Rim now was someone else entirely, someone with no past and no connections that could be traced. The second thing he did was start learning everything he could about the Sarkani Empire. He spent weeks in the information markets of Freeport Station, buying data from smugglers and pirates who had tangled with Sarkani forces. He learned about their military structure, their supply lines, their patrol schedules. He studied their ships, their weapons, their tactics. Most importantly, he learned about their arrogance. The Sarkani believed they were superior to all other species. They believed their military was unbeatable, and their empire was eternal. They had ruled through fear for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to be afraid. Jake was going to remind them. His first target was a small supply depot on the edge of Sarkani space. According to his intelligence, it was lightly defended and contained spare parts for their patrol ships. Nothing that would cripple their war effort, but enough to get their attention. Jake spent 2 weeks studying the depot's routine. The supply ships arrived every 10 days. There were only 12 guards, and they rotated shifts in a predictable pattern. The depot's shields were strong enough to stop pirates, but not strong enough to stop someone who really understood how shields worked. On the night of the attack, Jake approached the depot in a stolen cargo hauler. His shuttle was hidden inside the cargo bay, along with enough explosives to level a city block. When the depot's traffic control challenged him, he transmitted the proper identification codes he had purchased from a smuggler who used to work legitimate cargo runs. Before the Sarkani killed his family, Jake docked at the depot's main loading bay and walked out of his ship carrying what looked like standard cargo containers. The guards barely glanced at him. After all, he was just another human cargo hauler making a delivery. 15 minutes later, Jake was back in space when the depot exploded behind him. The blast was big enough to be seen from 3 systems away, but the explosion wasn't the real message. The real message was what Jake left behind in the depot's computer system before he destroyed it. You killed my wife. You killed my child. This is what justice looks like when it comes from someone who has nothing left to lose. More will follow. The Sarkani response was swift and predictable. They increased patrols in the area and put out bounties for information about the attack. They questioned every human in the sector and arrested dozens of People who couldn't prove where they had been that night. Jake watched their reaction from a hidden base he had established in an abandoned mining station. Everything they did told him more about how they thought, how they operated, how they could be hurt. 3 weeks later, he hit a communication relay that linked 12 Sarkani systems. 2 weeks after that, he destroyed a patrol ship that had been hunting smugglers near the neutral zone. Each attack was bigger than the last, each one more daring, but Jake wasn't just getting bolder. He was getting help. The first to find him was Lisa Park, a human weapons specialist whose family had been killed in a Sarkani raid 2 years earlier. She tracked Jake down after his third attack and offered her services. "I heard what they did to your wife," she said, when she found his hidden base. "I heard about Meridian Point, and I want to help you burn them down." Lisa brought with her contacts in the underground markets where illegal weapons were sold. Through her, Jake was able to acquire military-grade equipment that no civilian should have been able to buy. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, shield generators powerful enough to protect a small warship. Next came Captain Roy Adams and his crew. Adams was a former Earth Navy officer who had been dishonorably discharged for refusing to abandon a colony under Sarkani attack. His ship, the Iron Wolf, had been running supplies to resistance groups for 3 years. "I've been fighting these bastards one small job at a time," Adams told Jake during their first meeting. "But what you're doing, this could actually hurt them." "It's going to do more than hurt them," Jake said. "What's the plan?" "The plan is to show the galaxy what happens when you touch something humanity cares about." Word of Jake's campaign spread through the underground networks that connected refugees, smugglers, and resistance fighters across the galaxy. Humans who had lost family to Sarkani attacks began making their way to his hidden base. Other species who had suffered under the hegemony started providing intelligence and supplies. Within 6 months, Jake's small band of rebels had grown into something much larger. They had 5 ships, over 100 volunteers, and enough weapons to outfit a small army. More importantly, they had something the Sarkani had never faced before: an enemy that understood their weaknesses and had absolutely no fear of dying. "The Sarkani Empire controls over 200 systems," Alex Turner said during one of their planning sessions. Alex had finally tracked Jake down and joined his cause, bringing with him detailed star charts and intelligence from his shuttle pilot contacts. "They have thousands of ships and millions of soldiers," Lisa added. "How do we fight something that big?" Jake looked up from the tactical display he had been studying. In the 6 months since Lyra's death, he had changed. His face was harder, his eyes colder. The man who had once been a peaceful engineer was gone, replaced by something the galaxy had never seen before. "We don't fight their army," Jake said. "We make their army irrelevant. We turn their strength into weakness and their confidence into fear." "How?" Jake smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We show them what a human can do when you take away everything he loves." The first time the stars truly shook was over the industrial world of Karvak 7. Jake stood on the bridge of the Iron Wolf, watching as his plan unfolded below. Captain Adams had given him command of the small fleet they had assembled over the past year. 5 ships, each one modified with weapons and technology that shouldn't have existed outside of military research facilities. All ships. "This is Jake. Begin Phase 1. On the planet's surface, 3 major weapons factories worked around the clock to supply the Sarkani war machine. The factories were protected by orbital defense platforms and a garrison of over 10,000 soldiers. In normal circumstances, attacking such a target would require a full battle fleet, but Jake had stopped thinking in normal circumstances months ago. "Lisa, are you in position?" he asked through the communication system. "Quantum bombs are placed and ready," came the reply from the surface. Lisa and her team had spent 2 weeks infiltrating the planet, disguised as maintenance workers. "The factories won't know what hit them." Alex, status on the orbital platforms. "Computer virus uploaded and spreading. Their targeting systems should be completely offline in about 30 seconds. Jake had learned something important during his year of fighting the Sarkani. They were excellent soldiers and brilliant tacticians, but they had one critical weakness. They trusted their technology too much. Every Sarkani ship, every defense platform, every computer system was connected to a central network that made communication faster and coordination easier. It also made them incredibly vulnerable to someone who understood how that network operated. "Roy, are your people ready?" Standing by, Captain Adams replied. The rescue ships are in position. That was the part of the plan that the Sarkani would never understand. Jake wasn't just here to destroy their weapons factories. He was here to free the thousands of alien slaves who worked in those factories, species that the Sarkani had conquered and forced into labor, building the weapons that would be used to conquer more worlds. Execute. The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. Jake's ships appeared in the system simultaneously, using a new type of jump drive that Lisa had acquired from her black market contacts. The orbital platforms tried to respond, but their targeting computers had been infected with a virus that Alex had designed specifically for Sarkani systems. On the surface, Lisa's quantum bombs destroyed the 3 weapons factories in synchronized explosions that could be seen from orbit. The blast pattern was precise, destroying the industrial facilities while leaving the worker housing areas untouched. As Sarkani fighters scrambled to respond, Jake's rescue ships landed near the slave compounds. Within minutes, they were loading thousands of alien workers onto transport vessels. Jake, we've got incoming, Roy called out. Sarkani reinforcements just jumped into the system. How many? 12 heavy cruisers and a battle carrier. Jake smiled. Perfect. Alex, transmit the message. Across every communication channel in the system, from military frequencies to civilian broadcasts, the same message began playing. It was Jake's voice, but the words had been written in his heart months ago. My name is Jake Morrison. 1 year ago, Sarkani forces murdered my wife and unborn child on Meridian Point. They said they were protecting genetic purity. They said mixed families were an abomination that threatened the natural order. The Sarkani reinforcements were closing fast, but Jake's ships didn't move to escape. They were wrong. Love doesn't threaten the natural order. Love is the natural order. And when you attack love, when you murder innocence to protect your twisted ideology, you don't destroy what you're fighting against. You create something much worse. The first Sarkani cruiser fired, but the energy blast passed harmlessly through empty space where Jake's ship should have been. You create someone like me. Jake's ships materialized around the Sarkani fleet like ghosts, having used the same jump technology that had brought them into the system. But this time they weren't running. This time they were attacking. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. Jake's ships were smaller and faster than the Sarkani vessels. But more importantly, they were equipped with weapons that the Sarkani had never seen before. Gravity bombs that crushed ships like tin cans. Energy weapons that cut through shields like they weren't there. Nanobots that ate through hull plating and disabled life support systems. When it was over, the entire Sarkani reinforcement fleet was floating dead in space. This is what you get, Jake's message continued, broadcasting to every corner of the galaxy. When you touch something that humanity loves, we don't just fight back. We fight back with everything we have, everything we are, and everything we can become. The message ended, but Jake wasn't finished. Over the next 6 months, his attacks escalated beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. He didn't just hit military targets now. He went after the infrastructure that kept the Sarkani Empire running. He destroyed the central banking computers on their capital world, crashing their economy overnight. He released viruses into their communication, networks that replaced all official messages with the names and pictures of his victims from Meridian Point. He turned their own propaganda, broadcasts into recruitment messages for the growing resistance movement, but the attack that truly shook the stars came when Jake infiltrated the Sarkani homeworld itself. Security around the planet was absolute. No unauthorized ship could get within 100,000 kilometers of the surface. The orbital defense grid could destroy a battle fleet in minutes. The planet's surface was protected by energy shields that could withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. Jake walked through all of it like it wasn't there. He arrived on a civilian transport, carrying fake identification papers that were so perfect they had been issued by the Sarkani government itself. He spent 3 days as a tourist, visiting the museums where the Sarkani displayed artifacts stolen from conquered worlds. He ate in their restaurants and walked through their parks, listening to their citizens talk about their superiority over other species. On the 4th day, he disappeared into the maintenance tunnels beneath the capital city. General Vex Tharn was in his office, reviewing reports of the latest human attacks when every screen in the building went dark. A moment later, they all lit up with the same image, Jake Morrison's face. Hello, General. I wanted to talk to you personally about what happened on Meridian Point. Tharn hit his emergency communication button, but nothing happened. Every computer system in the building was under Jake's control. You killed my wife because she proved you wrong. She proved that love is stronger than hate, that unity is stronger than division. You thought killing her would end that truth. Instead, you just made me its instrument. Alarms started blaring throughout the capital city as Jake's virus spread through the planetary computer network. Traffic control systems shut down. Power grids failed. Communication satellites went offline. I could kill you, General. I could kill every Sarkani on this planet. But that would make me like you, and I'm not like you. Instead, I'm going to do something worse. Every military installation on the planet suddenly went dark. Weapons systems shut down. Defense grids powered off. Spacecraft lost power and crashed to the ground. I'm going to take away your ability to hurt anyone ever again. The virus spread beyond the home world, carried by the Sarkani's own communication networks to every corner of their empire. Within hours, every military base, every government facility, every weapons factory in Sarkani space had been completely disabled. But Jake wasn't finished yet. You wanted to preserve genetic purity? Fine, you can have it. But you'll have it alone, cut off from the rest of the galaxy, with no weapons and no power to threaten anyone else. Every jump gate leading to Sarkani space suddenly shut down, trapping their remaining ships in their home systems. The hyperspace beacons that allowed navigation between stars went offline. The Sarkani Empire was suddenly cut off from the rest of the galaxy, isolated and helpless. This is what justice looks like when it comes from someone who has nothing left to lose. Your empire is finished. Your war machine is destroyed. Your ability to hurt innocent people is gone forever. Jake's image disappeared from the screens, replaced by a single message that would remain there for years to come. They harmed her once. Her human husband shook the stars. Remember, by the time Sarkani forces reached the maintenance tunnels, Jake was gone, but his work was complete. The mighty Sarkani Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for decades, had been brought to its knees by one human who had loved his wife more than he feared death. And across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds where people had lived in fear of Sarkani raids, the word spread. Humanity remembers. Humanity protects, and when you harm someone humanity loves, the stars themselves will shake with the fury of their response. The war was over before most people realized. It had begun. Jake stood in the ruins of what had once been General Vex, Tharn's command center on the fortress world of Sarkanis Prime. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across broken walls and twisted metal. The general himself sat in the corner, no longer the proud military leader who had ordered the attack on Meridian Point, but a broken old reptile staring at the destruction of everything he had built. Impossible, Tharn whispered, his voice barely audible. Our empire controlled 200 systems. We had the strongest military in the galaxy. How could one human destroy it all? Jake didn't answer immediately. He was studying the tactical display that still showed the remains of the Sarkani Empire. Red lights marked dead systems, offline facilities, disabled fleets. In the space of 6 months, humanity's response to the murder of one woman had brought the galaxy's greatest military power to complete ruin. You never understood what you were fighting, Jake said finally. You thought you were fighting against mixed marriages and genetic contamination. But that's not what this was about. Tharn looked up with confusion in his ancient eyes. This was about love. Jake continued. About what happens when you take love away from someone who has nothing else left to lose. Through the broken windows, they could see the lights of refugee ships in orbit. Species that had been enslaved by the Sarkani for generations were finally free. The underground networks that Jake had built during his campaign were now working openly, helping former slaves find new homes and reuniting families that had been separated for decades. Your empire fell because you forgot something important, Jake said. Fear might make people obey you for a while, but love makes them willing to die for each other. And when you attack love, you don't destroy it. You make it stronger. Alex Turner's voice came through Jake's communicator. Jake, we're getting reports from across the galaxy. 12 different species have declared independence from hegemony allies. The Granite Council is offering to mediate peace talks. Even the Krell merchant guilds are asking how they can help with refugee relief. Jake smiled, but it was a sad smile. Tell them we'll coordinate through the usual channels. Make sure the refugees get priority. What about you? Are you coming back to Meridian Point? They're rebuilding the station and they want to name the new diplomatic center after Lyra. Jake was quiet for a long moment. He looked down at General Tharn, who was still trying to understand how his mighty empire had fallen to one grieving human. "Not yet," Jake said. "I have one more thing to do." He left Tharn alive in the ruins of his command center. The general would live to see his former slaves building new lives as free beings. He would live to see the galaxy become a more peaceful place without the Sarkani Empire's hatred driving constant warfare. Living with that knowledge would be a better punishment than death. Jake's final stop was Meridian Point. The station had been rebuilt in the year since the attack, but it looked different now. The new construction was stronger, more defensible. The designers had learned from what happened before, but more importantly, the spirit of the place had changed. Where once there had been casual cooperation between species, now there was something deeper. The beings who lived and worked on Meridian Point had been through something terrible together, and they had survived it. They understood that their diversity was not a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be protected. Jake found the memorial garden in the center of the new diplomatic complex. It was beautiful in a way that Lyra would have appreciated. Plants and flowers from dozens of worlds grew together in perfect harmony, creating something more beautiful than any single species could have achieved alone. At the center of the garden was a crystal monument inscribed with the names of everyone who had died in the attack. Lyra's name was there along with their unborn child's, but there were other names too. Humans and Valari and granite people and Krell and species Jake had never heard of. All of them people who had believed in love strong enough to cross the barriers between worlds. Jake knelt beside the monument and placed a small crystal flower at its base. He had taken it from Lyra's homeworld during his travels, carrying it with him through every battle and every victory. "I kept my promise," he said quietly. "I made your death mean something." The garden was peaceful in the afternoon light. Children from different species played together nearby, their parents watching with the kind of protective awareness that came from knowing how precious such moments could be. In the distance, Jake could hear the sounds of the station going about its daily business. Trade negotiations and cultural exchanges and all the thousand small interactions that made civilization possible. "Jake?" He turned to see a young Valari approaching. Her crystal formations were still developing, marking her as barely an adult by her species standards. But there was something familiar about her empathic presence. "I'm Kira," she said. "Lyra was my cousin. I wanted to thank you for what you did. I didn't do it for thanks. I know. That's what makes it mean something." She sat down beside him on the garden bench. "My people have a saying. When love dies, the universe grows smaller. When love is avenged, the universe grows larger." Jake looked at her with surprise. "I never heard that saying before," Kira smiled. "We just made it up. Based on what you did, it's going to be taught to our children for generations. And what will you teach them about me? That love is the strongest force in the universe. That when you hurt someone's family, you don't just hurt them. You hurt everyone who believes in what they believed in. And that humans..." She paused, her empathic abilities letting her feel the complex emotions that Jake carried. That humans love in a way that can shake the stars themselves. Jake stood up slowly. In the distance, he could see Alex Turner approaching with a group of station officials. They probably wanted to debrief him, to understand exactly how he had accomplished what he had done. Later, there would be ceremonies and medals and requests to help with other conflicts in other parts of the galaxy. But for now, there was just this moment in the garden, surrounded by the proof that Lyra's vision of a united galaxy had survived her death. "Will you stay?" Kira asked. Jake shook his head. "My work here is done, but I'll be around, somewhere out there keeping an eye on things." He started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. "Tell them," he said, "that the stars remember. Tell them that love doesn't die, it just changes form. And tell them that if anyone ever tries to destroy what we've built here, they'll have to answer to all of us." As Jake left the memorial garden, his footsteps echoing through the corridors of the rebuilt station, word was already spreading through the galaxy's communication networks. The story of the human who had loved an alien woman so much that her death brought down an empire. The story of how one man's grief had freed millions of beings and changed the course of galactic history. Years later, when children of all species learned about the great conflicts of their time, they would be told about the Battle of Meridian Point and the fall of the Sarkani Empire. They would learn about the importance of defending love and protecting the innocent. But more than anything, they would learn about the night when a human named Jake Morrison looked up at the stars. and made them shake with the power of his love and the fury of his justice. They harmed her once. Her human husband shook the stars, and the stars would never forget.